just want to situate us in the rhythmical world at the moment. So, so let's just say this is our sun, and here's our little Earth thing, and then so that's a year, right? And if we wanted to look at Mars, a Mars year, Mars is like every 2 Earth years. And if we looked at Jupiter, there'd be 12. If we looked at Saturn, there would be 30 altogether. Just different scales of time. If we go in from the Earth toward the sun, Venus is going around 8 times for every 5 times the Earth goes around, which is very hard to do. 2 years that are connected to a single torso. And then Mercury goes around 4 times for every 1 Earth year. So different scales of time. If we look at Earth as it's going around, we have the moon, right, going around once per zodiac house, in a sense. Like if you look at this as a clock, 12 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, like those are months. Then within a month, slow this down, and the Earth is spinning around 30 times for the minute. So those are our days. We wake up in the morning and we're like, oh, it's light out. And it's just because we're facing the sun. We're coming around the bend, they're like, look, the sun's moving. It's so cool. And then, in the context of this stuff, it's like that's like, I'm just going like that. But we're like, oh, it's a new day. I mean, and that's a good, it's a good day. It seems like a long time for us, but it also seems like a short time. There's some ways in which whoa, that single day, we're like, there's no way the Earth is spinning. There's no way the Earth is that big and it's going so fast in space. But it is. There's something about scales of space and time that we have we have a limited window on it, and that's cool. But it's also what's cool is weirdly the bigger you go, things we don't get ever to the end, and the smaller you go, you don't get to an end of things. If anything, you get to more nothingness. So it's almost like we're at this lens point. What we see is a kind of lens point in time space. This is just a preface. But within a day, right, we break stuff up into hours, but we could just think about we have sleep and wake. You have cycles because your brain and body need to do something completely different when you're asleep versus when you're awake. So you have to have 2 opposite periods, and that's just with inhale and exhale. So the thing I want to talk about is breath, and it feels like I just felt like I had to go next because there's so many similarities with stuff that you were talking about. But unfortunately, I didn't hear that episode, and I know there's this really great book on breath that I have not read yet. So I've just been trying to figure this stuff out. So the question is, why do we focus on the breath in meditation and yoga? So a first thought is when you're first learning meditation, you're told focus on the breath, sit down, relax, focus on your breath. But then if I asked why, presumably the advice would be you gotta relax the body, and then you want to slow down the heart rate, just relax. But there's this weird paradox. I don't know if you thought about this. I've been thinking about this for a while, and it's weird. But once I started thinking about that, I was like, wait, if we're slowing down the breath, does that mean we're getting in less air? And the whole point of the heart is to go to send the blood out and suck it back in and put the oxygen in and come back and get rid of the carbon dioxide, right? So if we're bringing in less air, doesn't it make sense that unless our body just it's cool, now we don't need oxygen anymore? It's not that. You would think that the heart would have to speed up, right? This paradox. So And just since I'm into like rhythmic stuff anyway, and I was writing about heart neurons, and heart neurons are cool because there's 20,000, I think, neurons in the sinoatrial node that like they're all individual. They fire once a second. Take one of them out, put it in a dish. It's gonna be very small, but if you look carefully, it'll go once a second, and then you squirt a little stress juice on it, like norepinephrine, and it'll go. What you're doing is you're just opening some channels to let positive ions in to make it go faster. You squirt on instead a little bit of acetylcholine or like your parasympathetic system juice, like your vagal toning from your 10th cranial nerve, like people talk about that in the. Yep. Anyway, that's just gonna close those same channels, make it take longer for the neuron to go. So there you have like it's like a simple thing in a sense that creates the rhythm of the heart. Why slowing down the breath is gonna slow down the heart rate. So this is the stuff where I'm still trying to figure it out. But apparently like so you bring in air, there's like 15 times or something like that more oxygen in the air that you're bringing in versus in the blood. So the air just wants to go into the blood and it diffuses through the blood vessels, the capillary vessels. Then, so like old blood is coming in to the heart, pumped into the lungs, gets rid of carbon dioxide, picks up oxygen, back into this heart, and then sent to the rest of the body again. And that's happening right with every heartbeat. And on the inhale, it's like 15 times as much oxygen in the air that's in the lungs as opposed to the blood. But on your exhale, now it's still like 13 times as much. So it's like oxygen's still going. It's like there's like more pressure when you have more air in your lungs. But it's not that big a difference. And same with carbon dioxide. I think it's like a 10 to 9 ratio. It doesn't change that much. So basically, they're two different things. There's like ventilation, which is like you gotta always be like restoring the air, but then all the time, in the sense the air is going, you're getting rid of carbon dioxide and putting in oxygen. And the blood, that makes sense with the blood going back and forth. So I think this is the part I'm not 100% sure about, but one of the parts. Maybe when you have a big breath, I think that pressure might be even more. So slowing down the breath, the original issue I had is like slowing the breath inevitably comes with deepening the breath. So you might even be creating more pressure for the oxygen to go into the air, just like keeping it longer. So your breathing becomes more efficient. So your heart, so the blood is actually getting more oxygenated when you're having slower breaths, even though there's fewer breaths. Cool so far, right? Okay. So now, the original question I asked you was, why focus on the breath? Now I'm gonna ask, but why focus on the breath? This is where I think it also we've been reading each other's minds. So this I found a neuroscience article that made sense of brain rhythms in a way that I hadn't been able to make sense of them before. And this guy, I eventually realized he's just an MD, but he only has one MD. I don't know. It's like his job is not to publish research. He's a doctor, but he's writing these really cool articles. It's not like a lot of people are reading them, but I just found one of them and I was like, what is this? This is amazing. He solved all these things for me. He's an MD somewhere in like Baltimore or Indiana. His name is Ravinder Giraffe, which I think is maybe an Indian name. I'm not sure, but he has published a book on pranayama, like from 10 years ago. It's like probably self-published. I'm sure it's not a big thing, but I was like, oh, okay. So he really was motivated to kind of figure this stuff out with, from a meditative place, which I think is very cool. This is so. The just little history of EEG with Hans Berger in 1920 or so. Falls off a horse. His sister immediately writes him a letter. I was like, I had this dream that you fell off a horse. Are you okay? And he's like, I did fall off a horse. I bet ESP is real. I'm gonna make a machine that can electrically detect signals outside of the brain. And lo and behold, like it definitely does, you know, the electrical signals don't go much farther than here, but there are electrical signals that you can detect outside the brain because your brain's electrical and like, I don't understand how that works. But anyway, he puts an electrode back here and the first thing he finds is like, it's just like static white noise, you look all crap, and then the person closes their eyes and goes tick, 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 tick. And they open their eyes again and it's like just nothing. And they go tick, 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 tick. I can't do it as fast, it goes 10 times a second, but that's kind of like, so that's called the alpha rhythm. First one he discovered calls it alpha. Next he figures out when you move your eyes or you move a part of your body, you get it at twice that rate, and this is roughly twice the rate. So you're getting and so he calls that the beta rhythm. You end up, so alpha beta is roughly twice alpha. You have gamma, it's roughly twice beta, and you can keep going a little bit higher. There's like higher and higher gamma. Once you get into gamma range, it's basically stuff becomes pitch. So I can almost do it. Right, it starts to fuse together, and we hear that as pitch. That's really just fast rhythm. It's not changing in the physical realm, but it's changing in our brain realm. So rhythms like become pitches. Below alpha, you have, you're gonna slow us down to delta for a second. Heart rate about once per second. As fast as like two times a second, maybe a little bit faster, 2.5. That's the delta range of, and you have brain rhythms at that rate. It's not because of the heart, but similar sorts of channels. And so like in the range of like the pulse in music, that's your delta, those are your delta rhythms. And then in between that and alpha, you have theta, and that's basically like the fastest I can move my hand, about 5 times a second, and that's within theta range. And if I did this comfortably, that's still within theta. So in the 1950s, they start putting people to sleep and putting electrodes on their heads, and they're like, whoa, these rhythms are super pronounced in sleep. So it's like the stuff that Hans Berger figures out, it ends up being really cool for meditation too. But the first time, you know, he first discovers it, and then eventually they're like, whoa, sleep is like all about rhythms. So, and especially like these very big waves, slow rhythms. So, but then when I was growing up, like in the 80s and 90s, like it's like popular science magazines would sort of write about the rhythms of the brain. But I don't think that counted really as science at the time. It wasn't really understood what was going on. It was sort of like, I don't know, I just assumed it was not a real thing. So it's only very recently that I've been able to sort of like piece this stuff together and recognize that the way these circuits work are sort of like radios. Like radio has a signal, it transmits at this one frequency. If something else is listening at that frequency, it can pick up the signal almost done. Okay. And so the whole communicative process of things going on at all levels in the brain, not just, you know, takes place through the channels of rhythms and like the codes of rhythms. And I started us with like rhythm is not something that just belongs in a brain or just in a body. It's not something that humans just see. Every single organism on our planet, everything we know that is alive, first and foremost is a kind of like astrological being, something that tracks the stars, right? It's tracking where the Earth is. It's tracking where the moon is relative to the Earth. It's tracking where we are in our like rotation cycle relative to the sun. It's tracking the tides, which are based on the moon and the daily cycle. Okay, so, and then there's rhythms that are very slow and even so fast that it's pitch. So finally this, but you know, researchers will be like, I studied the gamma rhythm and not anything else. Ravindra Giraffe is the first person that I found who gave me some sort of explanation for how this all fits together. and is focused on breath. So the slowest rhythms, the ones that you really do see in sleep, but they're so slow that most people don't pay attention. They don't have names. They're just called slow 1, slow 2, slow 3, slow 4. Those, like, I don't know which ones specifically, but the slow rhythms basically ride upon the breath. Okay? So then if you think about ocean waves, bigger waves, you have littler waves, like the whitewater that rides on the slow, big things. That ends up being a principle just in systems generally. So your breath ends up being the thing, your slow rhythms basically just ride upon breath. And if you're in normal waking consciousness, and let's say like kind of scattered consciousness, that was perfect. Everything, all your different systems are doing different things and they're not super coordinated. Once you sit and not just breathe, but like you focus on the breath, you're sort of taking your higher cognitive rhythms and being like, cool, I'm gonna yoke them to my slower rhythms. I'm gonna take the gamma stuff, like people talk about high frequencies as being like really awesome. They're not, they're super stressful crap. I mean, that's how you think, but it's like the higher frequency stuff is like, if you can get that resting on the slower stuff, you can get gamma resting on theta, theta on alpha, alpha on theta, theta on delta, delta on slow, you're not just creating efficiency and relaxation in those higher things, but you're like I think in a literal sense, like unifying all the parts of your being. We're not just like unifying heart and lungs, but I think all the things that the nervous system does, which is everything, it's the whole body, right? I think you really are kind of like combining mind and body in that way. And so that gives us something, not just like why it's good to have breath control for heart and bodily functions, but I think that says something about why mind focusing on breath can sort of like yoke mind with body, and body gets to learn from mind, and like mind gets to learn from body too.